The Witch, Months of Howling, Year 2. You have been crying for a long time, child. He spoke, and though his voice was a distant roar, it was also gentle and kind.
I am very scared. I have let my friends down, and I don't know what else to do, and I will die here.
She responded, and her skin was very sunken and pale. Perhaps that is the way of things, he began, but it did not comfort her, and in his dreams, he shook.
Perhaps. But you're in pain as well, aren't you?
And he cried out, and his tears did not come, but he could feel the hooks in his flesh. They drunk deeply, and even his hate suffered, for the dark dragon grew faded in his mind. I am, child. He whispered, and his voice was hoarse. I am very sick, and it hurts.
Maybe. Can I help you, at least?
How halting was her voice, as tiny and insignificant against his scales as her hand, both sallow. But her tone was genuine, and he knew she wished nothing more in the moment. And he was reminded of earlier days, and it hurt too, and he went back to sleep. For the pain of waking was too much, too much. Lorelei stared at the great dreaming dragon. All their conversations had ended like this, of course. She could speak directly to his mind. But his mind was not well, and though she knew in reality she was growing weak, so too was he. Dragunov's pearl-white outer scales had lost some of their luster, and even though he had not been outwardly damaged, his mind still roiled from whatever torment he was going through. Once again, Lorelei tried to think of something. She hadn't tried to escape this place, banging her fists against the walls of the void, imagining herself in her old, real body, trying to imagine what Mildred might do, or say. Maybe Dennis was worried? That'd be just like him. Acting tough, but really worrying too much, haha. But another thought had grown inside of her, deep and unpleasant. There were no ties either had to her. Not Mildred nor Dennis. They did not like her, and never had. Mildred would not come for her. She would die. And yet, they seemed weak, like the kind of hooks that plagued Dragunov, and she refused to let them access into her mind. Even if she died here, she'd find a way out, first. Then she could see to the whole dying thing. Laughter came a little haltingly, and then, suddenly, Lorelei thought of her mother.
Hey, Mom!
She whispered, and tried not to imagine her. Not to keep the ghostly figure that wasn't her mother alive like that pastiche manor house. But her mother didn't come. Instead, Lorelei simply remembered their arguments, and how they'd always made up afterwards. Always. And a surge of determination shot through her, and she knew what had to be done.
Hey! Dragon! Dragunov! Can you hear me?
The great dragon twisted in his pained sleep, exposing blue and yellow scale like sky and sun.
We're going to get out of this, together. I promise you. No matter how many times it takes, we're going to get out of here.
And though Dragunov didn't respond, it didn't matter. She knew he understood. He must. Lorelei threw herself against the void, rolling into it and punching at it with her fists and clawing at it and cursing at it and making silly faces at it. And with all of them, the void twisted a little to try to match what it thought she was doing, and what she expected of it. It opened quite suddenly, and not to where she planned to go, for through the tear she saw countless lights, and it took her some time to realize that they were stars. Each one shone in a beautiful color alien to her eyes but at peace with the great and countless void of space, and Lorelei somehow knew that it was not a different world, but a memory, perhaps of hers, colored by youth and forgetfulness into something unique only to her. She smiled and held her hand to the void, and realized it was not a prison, but a comforting blanket of starlight around her. And that she could go anywhere.
I suppose I can no longer call you Kindling, anymore.
Mildred mused ruefully, as they walked along the empty beach.
You can, if you like. I don't mind. It's kind of cool, like an in-joke between you and me, with no real punchline. A secret, between friends.
Her tutor stared at her with a careful expression, deep green skin not budging a muscle. And then Mildred smiled.
Friends? True enough, I suppose. Harumph. Though you shall have to save such niceties for when we meet in private, I am not one for such trivialities. You must be quite cautious, however. I have been at my own work, kindling. What you return to will not be safe. Do you need some time?
Lorelei nodded, slowly.
I'd like that. Yes. This is very lovely. Is it a place I know of, or you? Neither.
Mildred shook her head, frowning in an affectionate way, as only she could.
'Tis a place where I think most magical folk find themselves. It as much an island as the one you fell unto, but adrift in the greater sea of things. I do not much care for it, but I knew you would come here. I never lost faith in you.
And that was the highest praise the ancient witch could give her former pupil.
Be warned. The howling winds will die out, but the true test is yet to begin. I will aid you when I can, and as for the matters at hand, I shall take care of them. Go forth now, kindling. We shall take tea again, when next we meet.
Cackling, Mildred disappeared into her own hat and Lorelei was alone. Almost. But she knew that whomever was watching wasn't a threat for now, so she decided to ignore them.
Right. So, to return home, I just...
It was like a vast tunnel through space and time, and Lorelei instantly knew that she'd want to travel with her body next time, for it was not the jump that made her nauseous but suddenly landing back in her own flesh. And she was at once aware that her skin was dry and leathery and her lips were broken and her eyes stung from the light of the braziers, but that she was alive and the traps of that cruel man had been nothing for her. In front of her, someone had placed several cans of what seemed to be cucumber soda. If it was another witch, one could not say. Lorelei drank greedily, already scanning for any sign of Dennis, or the rest of Leopold's group, but there was no one present. After her thirst was quenched, Lorelei whirled in place and turned plaintively to Dragunov, who himself had grown pale and weak. She imagined she could even see skeletal indentations under his proud draconic frame. But no longer.
It's time. Dragunov. You need to wake up. I know it hurts to be awake, and I know you're scared of a lot of things. But if you don't wake up, you're going to die, and that'll hurt you, and all those who care about you, and those you protect.
But Dragunov was silent, for whether he heard or he did not care about those things, she could not say.
Even Lazarus'll care. Because without you, he won't have anyone to fight, and he'll be alone. So get up. You need to get up, right now. Lazarus.
And slowly, one massive eye of the great dragon's force slit open, gleaming like true and unburnished gold. But her joy was short-lived, as the dragon roared, and his rattling challenge cast off the chains and hooks that had stolen from him even as they shook the entire island.
Lazarus!
The scent of atmosphere around him grew pale and gleamed with dust, and then something blue-white and scalding tore through the tomb roof, and the great dragon stared down at her, eyes unseeing, clouded with revenge, but a hint of memory in his voice.
Child! You must leave. I will end it. I shall end Lazarus, at long last.
Ecstasy flooded his voice as great, gilded wings spread, and the holy dragon lifted into the sky, the wind cheering his ascent as the back blast of his wings and tail threatened to send her flying from her wheelchair and crashing against the desecrated tomb. But she held on, despite her tears. As Lorelei watched him leave, she wiped her eyes and tried to focus.
What? What have I done? What I could not. For that, I must thank you. I am sorry for the shadow play, but I am only a third-rate magician. You are quite talented.
Grinning from ear to ear, Leopold walked towards her, once again unaccompanied by his associates. She wondered, with a horrified feeling in her gut, what might have happened to them, and what had happened to Dennis. But that horror burnt bright within her, and she realized that he was nothing more than an old man, and Lorelei pointed at him, teeth ground against each other so tightly that she could taste her own enamel.
I am more than you will ever be. So, surrender, because I'm not going to kill you. But I'm going to make it so that you can't hurt anyone ever again. You've got nothing in Dragunov, nothing. So. Let's end this.
But Leopold kept smiling, and his smile was unfathomably cruel.
Crimsolino, you may detach yourself from the ceiling, now. Do me a favor. Make an example of this young woman as you did with that misborn lump.
With great sorrow, a bundle of red feathers fell from one of the broken awning rafters, and the former Duchess refused to meet Lorelei's eyes.
I am terribly sorry. I'm quite immune to magic, you see, but this shouldn't hurt. I shall not.
But no matter what she said, Lorelei did not show fear or back away, and somehow that only made everything worse.
I'm not going to fight you. I said as much. We'll meet again.
Lorelei concentrated, and it was surprisingly easy how quickly she found herself behind Leopold. His right shoulder did not budge at all as she placed her hand there, and it took him a half moment to realize she had both disappeared, and found herself so readily behind him. His eyes were as wide and as terrified as dinner plates.
And you will pay. For everything you've done.
Then, Lorelei was gone, and she could hear the harpies squawking and just see Leopold slump to the floor before she reappeared outside, adrift in snow and ice. It was very cold. Holding her arms around herself, Lorelei gave a few moments to her breathing, to take in the cold air and make it warm, to not panic, and to understand that things would be as they were. She could see the trail of destruction carved across the island by Dragunov in his haste to find his ancient enemy, but no sign of the tomb was present. She had jumped very far, indeed, and it was very cold.
This might be the worst possible time, but you look miserable. Need a light?
Pulling her way through the melting snow was a woman clad in a bad suit, and a bright red tie. Her eyes were very tired, and her smile was genuine, but even though they had met before, Lorelei was suddenly aware how off it was, how off everything about the strange woman was, and how it hurt to look at her for too long. And how she smelled of ocean brine and...
How did you find me here?
Lorelei asked, swallowing deeply. Then, she tried to smile like she had when she was a little less aware, and after some time, found it wasn't quite so difficult as she imagined it to be. As long as she asked. She had to ask.
Oh, well, you know me. I have this habit of turning up where I smell trouble, and also ozone. There was a huge dragon what came and flew all over the island. Looking for trouble and yelling, "Ihi! Laissez Aris!" Like the name was important.
The stranger took a long drag at a cigarette, lips pursed.
And there might have been some other stuff, but that was the long and the short of it. Mostly a gut feeling I should take a walk. And hey, look! I met up with a sweet girl again, though I can't imagine we'll get to talk about too much for pleasure right now.
Lorelei nodded, slowly. The fire was hardly warming, but the stranger held her lighter out, and the paltry flame was better than nothing. She had to ask.
Are you?
Lorelei had shut her eyes, but refused to keep them shut. She opened them, and fixed the stranger in her eyes and was careful not to think too much about what she saw.
You're dead, aren't you?
Her response was a smile like waterlogged tar, but it seemed normal enough if you didn't stare right at her, so it was fine.
Who can say? I prefer not to think about it so much. Thinking about things is overrated. I'm just out here to do good and help my friends, which is why, coincidentally, you and I are talking. You're pretty close to a weird little place, just a bit to the south. I imagined if you wait there long enough, you'll meet up with that loud-mouthed guy again, so have no fear, all right?
Whatever nervousness she had had, Lorelei found it had dissipated significantly with the ridiculous pose the stranger cut. Half sighing and half laughing, she ran a hand through her hair, and held the other out to the stranger.
Well, thank you. I'll go there, I suppose. Would you like to come with me? It'd be nice to have a friend around.
Finishing her cigarette, the stranger laughed heartily.
Nay, I'm glad I saw you again, though we'll have to catch up for serious later, but, I'm not really here waiting for you. It's more a different kind of gut feeling, that just had the fortunate benefit of crossing paths. So, I'll see you around.
Lorelei took her hand and shook it, and it felt perfectly normal. And then she concentrated and was off, hopping through time past the many unflinching tracks the stranger had left as she had single-mindedly walked through the snow, to wherever she was still intent to reach. It wasn't a perfect jump, of course, Lorelei was still learning. But what she arrived at reminded her instantly of the yards, a maze of metal and wire and fencing that felt more threatening than homey. And yet on some level, a wave of nostalgia washed over her, and she let the wire graze her fingers. Perhaps, if the universe were this flexible, if universes were this flexible, perhaps somewhere, Mom was doing the same thing.
Excuse me. Binky was wondering if you had seen women around. Yes.
Lorelei replied without thinking, then smiled at the Cyclops who, for some odd reason, had Boleslava perched upon his head.
Oh. And hello, Boleslava. I think your own friend will be back soon. But would you two mind keeping me company for a while? I feel very tired.
But there was no rest to be had as a second, nightmarish trumpeting roared upon the distance. This one, however, was apparently a triumph, as a much-confounded Ruslana and Grendolf limped back, followed by hordes of demonic retinues, and
Dennis.
Lorelei shook off her tiredness as she rolled towards him. They embraced, and Dennis adjusted his sunglasses, which had been mended with something that looked worryingly like duct tape.
Heh. Nerd. I don't die easily cause I'm tough like that. And, that bird lady didn't kill me. Probably was miring my muscles, got scared off or something.
Around them hung courtiers and nobles and strange-dressed creatures with many limbs and many eyes, and they were all staring at her expectantly.
I kinda talked up your game, so don't make me look bad. But Gimpy. Lorelei.
Dennis was quiet as he worked up the courage to speak, and his voice was so low that she knew none of his compatriots could hear him, for she barely could.
This isn't. I'm not cut out for this. I'm going home.
Lorelei smiled softly, and placed a hand on his shoulder.
It'll be nearly impossible for me to press on without you, Dennis. Any chance you would let me visit, sometime?
From behind mended glasses, his eyes bugged out.
No way. You can do that whoosh whoosh portal thing? Heh, not that I doubted you or anything, but I guess. So long as you just stand in the corner and admire my docky collection.
But she thought she detected a faint hint of happiness in his voice, and even if she didn't.
Well, don't just stand there. Introduce me to all your country folk, kin, friends, here.
And so saying, Lorelei stared past the demons, back at the soldier woman and her terrifying companion, and then at the faces of the young man she had helped earlier. She was surrounded by friends, here. No matter what came, the future would be bright. She would make it so. Chapter end.